I absolutely love stories like this. I love it when they eat their own. This is why I encourage people to just disengage and block and mute all the lunatics. Because if you're not there for them to dogpile on, out of sight, out of mind. Very few people are obsessed enough with you in particular that after you disappear from their radar, they're going to hunt you down to keep harassing you. There's always going to be a few, and the bigger you are, the more of them you're going to have. But the vast majority of these lunatics, as soon as you are no longer easily accessible to them, they will start canceling each other as they are constantly looking for something else to be oppressed by. Professional victims have to always be victimized by something or they lose their source of income. So as soon as the current oppressor is gone, they will manufacture a new one. And if they look around for a new oppressor and all they see is others like them, well, try wounding a piranha and see what the other piranhas do. Doctor canceled by American Medical Association for racist comments is actually an anti-racist activist. It is an objective fact that Dr. Livingston is innocent of racism and is himself an adherent of what the New Left calls anti-racism. I know this because I did what the media wouldn't, my homework. And for the sake of fairness, I do gotta respect the post-millennial for doing some digging and reporting on this. But on the flip side, I don't really care that much. I love it when they cancel each other. Because every time they cancel one of their own, that's one of ours that's not being canceled by them at the moment. So still, no sympathy, but I gotta respect their journalistic integrity. Until last week, Dr. Edward Livingston was a celebrated academic known for his compassion and for being a wise hand at difficult topics. He was the deputy editor of the Journal of the American Medical Association, the AMA's scientific and scholarly arm that hosted and host of its successful JAMA Clinical Reviews podcast. Now he is persona non grata. And this is what you get for hanging out with these fuckers. Like, you hitched your wagon to these diseased, like, rabid fucking horses. What did you expect was going to happen to you, huh? Does anyone care about the truth when a juicy narrative is afoot? Will we burn everything down to get at the sin of racism even when none occurred? Well, once again, when they're doing it to their own, I don't care. Yeah, I always use the analogy that you always have to fight against censorship because eventually, even if your stuff's not being censored yet, the front lines will fall back to your hill eventually. And then you will be the front lines and you will wonder why no one is helping you, right? But in cases like this, when it comes to cancel culture, we've already been canceled. Our hill has already been overrun. We're already behind enemy lines, basically. We have no reason to help the people who just stood by and maybe even helped the enemies take our hill. Fuck them. They're on their own. If you Google Livingston's name, you'll find such damning headlines like JAMA posts podcasts on structural racism. Here's the backlash. JAMA apologizes and deletes tweet that questioned racism in medicine. No physician is racist. Twitter calls foul on JAMA podcast, and dozens more just like it. In addition to the media pressure, there's a cadre of social justice grifters with petitions on change.org, almost 3,000 signatures strong, demanding JAMA and Livingston be held accountable for perpetuating racism in medicine. Man, wouldn't it be funny if that number grew now? Facing such an impossibly overwhelming force, the panicking AMA fired Livingston, memory hold the offending episode, and announced a formal investigation. As the finishing touch, AMA CEO Dr. James Madara declared what amounts to the AMA pledging itself to anti-racism as popularized by Ibram X. Kendi. Well then, if all the important folks are now agreed, if the media says Livingston is racist and the AMA says he's a racist and the Twitter mob says he's a racist, then he must be a racist, right? That is how adults in current year decide such things these days. Except there's just one teensy problem, and that is the truth. Oh, the truth is that anti-racists are closet racists, just like how feminists, like male feminist allies, end up being creepers. Or the anti-lolly crowd always ends up with CP being found on their devices. Funny. The facts are irrelevant at a witch trial. This is someone who was on the side of the mob, you know. Let him deal with it. Let them fight. It is an objective fact that Dr. Livingston is innocent of racism and is himself an adherent to what the New Left calls anti-racism. I know this because I did what the media wouldn't, my homework. Whether it be out of laziness or purposeful manipulation, publications like Medscape, Business Insider, Forbes, The Hill, and The Root all condemned Livingston. Not a one bothered to provide even a copy or a transcript of the offending audio. And guess what? Nobody. Now, Post Millennial is the only place that's going to defend this guy because of my principles. But everyone else is like, who cares if they're canceling their own? Once again, every one of their own that they're canceling is one of us they're not canceling. So keep going. I'm just going to sit here and watch. Livingston's detractors' so-called proof is a singular bad podcast alert tweet and some uncontextualized lines of dialogue. The declarative shout for racism is a tweet, the kind of which an intern might write or post as a mangled copy from Slow Notes, which was sent out from the Jamma Twatter handle. It read, "No physician is racist, so how can there be structural racism in healthcare?" An explanation of the idea by doctors for doctors in this user-friendly podcast from the great Dr. Katz, NYCHH, and EHL Jamma. The odds that the deputy editor at one of the most influential journals of medicine in the world wrote his own podcast alert is an absurdity. I agree, but look at that title. This was someone who was actively shilling there's structural racism in everything myth. So let him enjoy the people that he sucked up to. Not going to get any sympathy from me. The other evidence against Livingston are quotes devoid of context from the podcast episode, Structural Racism for Doctors, What Is It? This featured public health experts Dr. Mitch Katz, CEO of New York Shitty Health and Hospitals, and what was the fourth part of a series dedicated to fighting racism in medicine, of which Livingston was a participant. Doesn't it suck when the people you're virtue signaling to cancel you? Maybe you'll rethink who you side with in the future, huh? Here's the line shared by the media to justify indignation. Structural racism is an unfortunate term. Personally, I think taking racism out of the conversation will help. Many of us are offended by the concept that we are racist. Something tells me that the context of this line is going to make this guy look even worse than just the line on its own, really. Yeah, have you guys been noticing that there have been so many more leftists speaking out against cancel culture now that it's moving from right to left? If I didn't see you speaking out against it when it was our side being canceled, I'm just going to bust out the popcorn when it comes for you. Your chickens are coming home to roost, motherfuckers. I hope you're ready for it. You do not need a degree from J School to see that the media are cherry-picking this comment. According to anti-racists, structural racism is what happens when parts of society get ordered in such a way that it disproportionately hurts minorities or folks like me, the disabled. The media wants you to believe that Dr. Livingston, a Jewish descendant of immigrants, is a closeted structural racism denier. Nothing could be further from reality. Here's the full breadth of his closing comments with a link to the full episode and transcript so you can do what the media refuses. Listen for yourself. Yeah, structural racism is an unfortunate term to describe a very real problem, Livingston said. There are structural problems in our society. As Dr. Katz pointed out, there are neighborhoods that are impoverished. The quality of life is poor in those areas because we may put factories in them, of major thoroughfares that travel through them. So here's a fun fact before I move on. There are a lot of like super poor white communities, like Appalachia, for example. Almost exclusively nothing but dirt poor white people. But since they're not in these big urban population centers where everyone sees them constantly, out of sight, out of mind. Wonder what kind of structural racism fucked them over. But we strive to have a society that's more equal, where everybody has the same opportunities so that hardworking people can improve those neighborhoods and make them better for the people who live there. One correction here as well. Usually, what happens is as soon as smart, hardworking people actually get ahead, they leave those communities. Because more often than not, those communities were actively trying to hold them back, not help them. There are a few cases where the community realizes that someone among them has potential to do better and they boost them up. That happens sometimes. But most of the time, what happens is as soon as the rest of the community sees that someone is trying to excel, the crabs in a bucket mentality kicks in and they drag their ass down. Say, what, you think you're too good for us? And then as soon as this, whoever this is, succeeds in spite of their community, as opposed to because of their community, then the same people that tried to drag them back into the bucket with the rest of the crabs, now those people show up with their hands out. Like, when are you going to give back to the community that gave you so much, huh? And they wonder why everyone who's worth a shit just leaves. The racism part means that in these poor areas, there tends to be a disproportionate share of certain kinds of races, such as blacks or Hispanics. They aren't there because they're not allowed to buy houses in better neighborhoods, or they can't get a job because they're black or Hispanic. That would be illegal, but disproportionality does exist. And we as a society need to figure out why that occurs and how to make conditions better for people who live in structurally undesirable circumstances. So this is going to be a hot take, but I'll tell you why it occurs. It's for the same reason that the whole healthy at any size BS is happening right now. Someone could be doing something objectively wrong and detrimental to themselves, but you're not allowed to say it, or you're the one that gets in trouble. So in the past, when someone was being self-destructive, their community would fucking tell them that. Their community would come up to them and said, what the fuck are you doing? Don't you realize how horrible this is? You're going to hurt yourself. And they would talk some sense into them. And they would correct their bad behaviors. And what was the SJW's favorite term? Do better. But right now, you can't do that anymore. So people like us, who previously have tried to help others, we just don't anymore. If I know that my attempts to try to help you will be met with hostility and me being accused of being a racist or something because I don't respect your culture or whatnot, like, fine. Do what you want. I'll respect whatever you decide. It's not my problem. I'm just going to go to a completely different city so I don't have to deal with the fallout of what you're doing. So Livingston continued. Personally, I think taking racism out of the conversation would help. Many people like myself are offended by the implication that we are somehow racist. When many of us grew up in an era where where there had been racism and much progress had been made in ameliorating racism via dramatic legislation that was passed in the 60s, we were pretty close to actually having a colorblind society. And then the professional victims and race hustlers brought us back to this. I think the population at large would be more accepting of this general concept if we had concentrated on the structural part of it and ensured that all people who lived in these disadvantaged circumstances had equal opportunities to become successful and have better qualities of life. The focus must be on equal opportunity and making sure that exists. Now, I agree with this at the very end here. I agree with that. But the problem is, once again, if you're not even allowed to get to the root of the problem, you're never going to fix the problem. It's like your 400-pound relative complaining about all the health problems they have. And shit, this just happened actually in my real life. So one of my friends was giving me the play-by-play because he went to dinner with actually one of his friends' families, and one of the sisters is let's just say a little on the large side, And she was asking, she was asking her sister, like, oh, hey, do you have any advice? Any recommendations for doctors I can go to? Because let's just say she has health issues. And then the other sister gave her some advice, like, oh yeah, this doctor's pretty good. And so the land whale sister responds, this isn't one of those doctors that's going to tell me all my health problems are because I'm overweight, is it? As she is drinking her salad that's floating in ranch dressing. If you're not even allowed to get to the root of the problem anymore, the problem's never going to be solved. That's why people like me have given up helping those people. I only help those people who actually want help. If you're, I'm not like one of those fucking protagonists you see on TV shows. Like some village is in danger and they show up to help and the villagers drive him away because they don't believe him or something. And then he still stays there and helps them anyway. It's like, nah, if I try to help someone and they turn hostile to me, it's like, okay, you know what you're doing. I'm just going to move on. Because if I'm not going to waste my time on people who don't want my help anyway, when there's probably someone who does want my help, that would be a much better use of my time. That's the attitude that most of us are developing in current year. You keep punishing us for trying to help, and eventually we're going to stop helping. Eventually, we're going to focus more on distancing ourselves from you so we don't get caught up in the fallout of the stupid shit you're doing. As you can read from the transcript, Dr. Livingston never denies the existence of structural racism, only that he thinks the term with the word racism in it needlessly turns people off from considering the concept and its influence on society. For a regressive scholar, this is an entirely legitimate concern. Livingston wants to help the left more effectively spread their gospel of anti-racism. He's on their side. He is actively and intentionally anti-racist, which is why this is so fucking funny. I love it when they eat their own, because when they're eating their own, they're not eating ours. They're weakening themselves while leaving us alone. What more can we ask for? Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. This character assassination from lazy media outlets would never have taken place if the reporters had listened to the first 3 minutes of the episode, in which Dr. Katz says, yeah, I think it's a great question, Ed. I think actually acknowledging structural racism can be helpful to us because structural racism is not about whether someone is a racist or whether the individual person loves other people of a different ethnicity or doesn't like it. It's not about people's personal opinions. Structural racism refers to a system in which policies or practices or how we look at people perpetuates racial inequality. To date, neither Katz nor Livingston have apologized for being racist despite the threats from the mob, nor is JAMA recognizing the reality of the podcast production. That episode would have to have gone through several layers of professionals' approval before being published. All of this, start to finish, is an absurd moral panic. It is. And do you know how we solve these moral panics? When the people who tend to perpetuate them the most start suffering from them. You know how we're going to end cancel culture? Once the fuckers that keep perpetuating cancel culture get canceled themselves, that's how we put a stop to it. Censorship is the same way. You know how we turn pro-censorship Puritans into freedom fighters? Censor them. The only time anyone supports censorship is when they believe they're going to be censoring other people. But the moment they become the target of the censorship, suddenly they're all about freedom. That's what we have to do. In a sane world where media did their homework and told the truth, where elite institutions stood by their employees, where reality meant something, Dr. Livingston would not have been punished for his podcast, but rewarded, likely finding himself at the guest spot on CNN and MSNBC. Well, this guy, Dr. Livingston, was firmly on the side that keeps denying reality, that keeps perpetuating this type of bullshit. So why? Now, I could see what post-millennials doing here. This is more of an, they're using this scenario to attack the media. But me, on the other hand, I've already I've already given up on the media. I couldn't care less. I know how horrible the media is. I've been on the receiving end of this shit. I know. I know what the media's like. I'm using this as a ha ha moment more than anything. I'm enjoying the Schadenfreude. I'm enjoying the poetic justice here. Years ago, in a different life, back when I taught school, I remember discussing with my students the book The Scarlet Letter and the Salem Witch Trials that inspired it. An essential element of that story and the lessons we sadly need to relearn is that the trials were not just wrong because it is an evil thing to kill a witch, but that those murdered, I'm descended from several, were never witches in the first place. As it was with the 25 innocent souls murdered by a mob incensed by the so-called righteous members of the 17th century American elite, including medicine, as it is now. To the braying mob, it does not really matter who is guilty. All they ever really want is a scalp, and the sniveling cowards that control American institutions like the AMA will sell out a colleague for a whole lot less than 30 pieces of silver. And this is why I love this situation so much. Separate yourself from the mob, protect your scalp from them, and watch as they turn on each other for their scalps. What would happen if this mob went around town and didn't find anybody, but they needed a scalp by sundown? They're going to look around and see, wow, I'm surrounded by scalps I could be taking. That's how we fix the problem. We don't have to fight our enemies in this scenario. Like I said before, this is not a war. This is more of a siege than anything. We just have to outlast them. Build better and thicker walls to keep them away from us and wait. That's it. Just separate yourself and wait, and the problem's going to solve itself. Meanwhile, over here at Sick Fox Studios, anyone starts filing these fucking accusations at any of the people I work with, I'm actually going to stand by them. The only time I would throw one of my friends or employees or coworkers or colleagues under the bus is if there was actual hard evidence and a police report and all that other shit with it. If it's just some bullshit accusation by an outrage mob, they can go fuck themselves. All I'm going to do is block them all so they can't see me anymore. And within a few days, they're going to start turning on each other because they're going to forget about me, out of sight, out of mind. Modern problems require modern solutions. In the past, apologizing actually worked. Before people were this insane, even if someone was just offended and you didn't really do anything wrong, usually apologizing was enough to make them go away and leave you alone. It's like, whatever, I'm sorry. And then they left. Nowadays, an apology is a sign of weakness. Even worse, an apology is an admission of guilt. If you apologize, they will come at you even harder. It's never enough. You need to recognize this. How can the disabled or the medical professionals rely on the American Medical Association if it cowers to media outrage mobs? Oh, you're just now realizing that these big organizations can't be relied on? Welcome to the club. Congratulations. If they crash to Twitter, how will they stand up for the CDC or to the CDC or the Harris administration? It is unpopular these days in American media and elite society, especially in prestigious organizations like the AMA, to do the prudent and adult responsible thing and tell the mob to calm the fuck down, which is why I've given up on them. Fuck them. If all these legacy organizations want to be overrun by the mob and destroyed, let them. Instead of trying to save these worthless sacks of shit, you should be making your own. You should have the replacement ready to go. Because guess what? This shit ain't going to work on us. Outrage mob comes for us, I'm just going to block them all. However, for some of us, the truth still matters, and the objective reality is that Dr. Ed Livingston and his guest, Dr. Mitch Katz, are innocent of all charges of racist sentiment. But they're the ones that support this when it happens to other people, so just sit back and laugh. Nevertheless, many journalists and the AMA have dealt a gross injustice to a decent man. Will any of them care that they got their story wrong? No, they're going to care once they're on the receiving end of this themselves, okay? So just let it happen. Just watch and laugh. Will they care they ruined the life of someone on their side? If not now, they certainly will when they get a call from Dr. Ed Livingston's lawyer. Yeah, I doubt it. It is almost impossible to win a lawsuit on like libel and slander and defamation and all that. It is seriously, it's almost impossible. They're just going to be wasting their money if they try. But that aside, let them. If we can get two of our enemies embroiled in a legal battle with each other, a battle where both of them lose no matter who wins, fuck, let's do it. Shit, let's encourage them all to lawyer up and sue each other. Why not? Oh man, I am so excited to tell you guys right now that finally, after about a year of build-up and shilling, we have launched Blade Devil on Indiegogo, and so far it is doing so well thanks to awesome people like you. If you haven't backed it yet, then please check the links in the description and check out Blade Devil on Indiegogo. You will not be disappointed. Looking forward to seeing you there.